If you're thinking about investing in the Ridgid cordless power tool platform, hear me out, because I think you might be overpaying for tools that I believe are being squeezed out by their own sibling brands. And a lot of you have asked me to settle this debate after my tier ranking video a couple months back. So today, we're putting them head to head, tool by tool, to find out which TTI sibling should earn your dollar and your shop space. Let's get started. Now, if you already caught my bang for the buck tier list video, you already know I was not too kind to Ridgid, and you guys let me know in the comments that you felt very strongly about that. And trust me, I get it. I actually have nothing personal against Ridgid. And by the way, this video is not sponsored by one brand or the other. It's not sponsored by anybody, so don't worry about that. And I get why people are upset. Ridgid is a brand that's been around for over 100 years, originally dominating the plumbing tool space before coming in strong in the cordless power tool space around 20 years ago. And they put themselves in a really interesting middle position between the cheapo consumer grade tools of the time and the much more expensive but significantly higher quality pro grade tools. And that was a great sales pitch for a long time, and the tools largely lived up to it. However, like in a lot of industries, brands who sit in the middle are bound to get squeezed over time. Does anybody remember Porter Cable, for example? Since that time, the prosumer, or sort of high mid-tier end of the market, has become very crowded with some very serious competition. And that began to drive innovation, and quality quickly rose within these brands. Fast forward to today, and prosumer tools have all of the power and performance that most people could really ever use. This level of tool offers excellent value, and there's a lot of great brands to choose from. As power tool companies started to consolidate in the past couple of decades, engineering and manufacturing processes began to be shared across the industry, and some of the brands who previously swam in those lower end consumer grade waters started swimming upstream and began to seriously level up. A particular brand I have in mind, Ryobi, has probably had the biggest glow up of all of those brands, especially when it comes to their HP Brushless line. Ironically, Ryobi actually went from being the manufacturer of those early Ridgid tools to actually joining them as a sibling brand of TTI, who is the parent company who also owns Milwaukee. So you can kind of see the three-level hierarchy that they tried to build with these brands under the TTI umbrella. But I think the problem is that the floor was raised so much with Ryobi, and especially their HP Brushless line, that the quality gap between consumer tools and pro tools began to quickly shrink. So now the question is really, what does the price gap look like? And what do the two separate ecosystems of Ryobi and Ridgid offer you? So let's find out, starting as we usually do with a drill driver kit. This is a great place to start when building out a new setup because you get your essential tools plus some batteries and a charger to start out with. Ridgid offers a good kit in the form of a hammer drill kit with two smaller batteries and a charger, which is typical for the industry, for around $250. We're only taking retail prices into account. Every major brand is bound to have pretty good deals throughout the year. And you get 800 inch-pounds of torque on the drill and 2,300 on the impact driver. Both are brushless, by the way, but here's where it starts to get a little uncomfortable for Ridgid. First of all, the hammer drill is not totally necessary for woodwork. Let me just make that clear. But the problem is the only step down is going into the SubCompact line, which costs $200, and it has a decent amount less power to keep up with what Ryobi is offering. You'll actually need to stick with that hammer drill setup. The standard Ryobi HP offering is just a regular drill and an impact driver for $200 with 850 inch-pounds of torque on the drill and 2,200 on the impact driver. You're not misreading those numbers. They're almost identical to that hammer drill Ridgid kit for $50 less. And build quality in the hand is surprisingly close. If you don't believe me, I challenge you to go visit your local Home Depot or borrow one from a friend and see for yourself. You might just be missing out, especially when it comes to their HP line. And when the power figures are matched this closely between Ridgid and Ryobi, more often than not, it's gonna come down to the price. And you might be yelling at your screen by now because I'm completely discounting the lifetime service agreement that Ridgid is known for. And trust me, I will get to that at the end. But as far as just the tools themselves go, round one is going to go to Ryobi HP. Moving on to the saw category, which is where I always tell people to pay a little extra attention because the quality of your cuts is going to show up in your end product, arguably more so than a lot of other tool categories. Now, Ridgid has a brushless 7¼ inch circular saw for around $180. This is the standard size circular saw. I'm not going to get into why. I talked all about that in my last video, so you can check that out afterwards. And it's a fine saw, gets great reviews, Good cutting depth, I might add. It surpasses my personal benchmark of being able to cut a 3x in a single pass at 0 degrees, something that surprisingly few saws actually are able to do. And Ryobi HP comes in with their own brushless 7¼ for $150, which has the same exact capacity, which of course it does, because just look at these two next to each other. Usually when the parent company makes saws for different lines, they make them at least look different. These two look virtually identical to me. And the specs lead me to believe that they probably are under the hood as well. It's funny, it kind of reminds me back in the early 2000s when General Motors would literally take a Chevy Suburban, throw a Cadillac badge on it, and call it an Escalade without really making any other changes. To me, that's kind of what's happening here, so I just find that funny. Although I guess in this scenario, Ridgid is really more of the Buick of the TTI lineup, not really Cadillac. But anyway, bad analogies aside, with basically no other changes or standout features, obviously the Ryobi is the better circular saw buy, but the real story is the overall depth of the saw category in each ecosystem. For example, Ridgid offers a track saw, which is a really nice addition. I mentioned this plenty of times before. A track saw is not strictly necessary, but of course it's a nice tool to have. And if you're going to grow into a platform and you do want to invest in one down the road and you want to get away from a straight edge jig for whatever reason, it's just nice to have that optionality. They also offer a 7¼ inch miter saw, which isn't exactly full size, but it is nice that they have it. A lot of brands don't even have a cordless miter saw. Now, Ryobi counters this with their own track saw offering, although the reviews on the Ryobi one are pretty questionable in general, so keep that in mind. But it is there, and who knows, maybe they will fix it in a future iteration soon. And Ryobi also offers not just one, but multiple miter saws, including a much more versatile 10-inch size. And here's a kicker with Ryobi. They also offer an 8¼ inch cordless table saw. For a lot of people, the table saw is king saw in their shop, and the 8¼ size is typical of job site saws. It's not necessarily full size, but it can pretty much do anything you're going to be typically doing on a daily basis. So that's a really great addition. Ridgid unfortunately doesn't have a cordless table saw at all. And the fact that you get any of these tabletop saws in cordless is awesome if you have a small shop or you work outside primarily like I do. You don't have to worry about running extension cords or playing with limited outlets or tripping your circuit breaker if you decide to run a shop vac at the same time as running one of these saws. You can see that there's clearly a large lineup gap between these two brands when it comes to saws. So at a lower price point with a broader lineup, it was going to be pretty hard for Ridgid to compete in this category. Ryobi HP is going to win the saw category. Moving on to routers, Ridgid offers their brushless compact trim router for around $180, which is pretty expensive for this more mid-tier. As an example, Cobalt clocks in at $130, which is exactly the same price that the Ryobi offering also costs. And the Milwaukee trim router, by the way, costs $230. So you're kind of splitting the difference with Ridgid, which again puts them in a weird no man's land. Now, both the trim routers have solid reviews across the board, and similar to those circular saws, I wouldn't be surprised if they shared a lot of the internals. And honestly, this is a tool category without a ton of innovation lately, although I really wish someone would innovate on how annoying it is to change router bits. I know that's a bit of a first world problem, but we live in a world where on your impact driver, you can literally just pop in a bit and go, without having to fumble with like proprietary wrenches and stuff like that. Just saying. Neither brand offers a plunge-based accessory for those routers, which I think is honestly a miss on both of their parts because they can open up a world of possibility and versatility, especially in a smaller shop, without having to make room for a separate, usually much bigger plunge router. And for what it's worth, their bigger brother Milwaukee does offer one. So maybe one's on the way, but as of right now, neither Ridgid nor Ryobi have a plunge-based option. So these two are nearly identical in capability as far as trim routers go. I'm not really seeing a compelling reason to jump into the Ridgid for a $50 premium. So again, this one's going to come down to basically dollars and cents. Ryobi is going to win the router category. And believe me, I'm not the one to say that the cheaper tool is always better. I'm just not finding any compelling reasons to jump up to the Ridgid. Next, we're going to talk sanders. Most importantly, random orbital sanders, which is the most common and the most recommended sander for woodworking. Ridgid offers a brushless 5-inch random orbital sander for around $140. But Ridgid made some odd design choices here that we need to talk about. First, they only offer a subcompact model as far as brushless goes, which feels a little bit odd to be the only option in that side of the lineup. I think you should almost always stick with a brushless random orbital sander if you're going to go cordless. And secondly, I think it's pretty frustrating that it uses a rear mounted battery design. I've mentioned this in my Milwaukee video. I don't know what this trend is about, putting the battery on the back and throwing off that center of balance. It doesn't really seem ergonomic to me. I don't love this trend, but if you do, please let me know. Maybe I'm missing something here. Now, Ryobi HP offers their brushless sander for $130, and it's a very traditional sort of top mounted design. Everything's right above the sanding pad, and the battery slides in vertically. So I lean more towards that more traditional design personally. And outside of the orbital sanders, I'm not really much of a belt sander person myself, but if you are, both brands offer that in cordless. Plus, Ryobi offers this really crazy looking secondary belt sander that I have no idea how you would even use this in a wood shop. I think it's made more for like metal restoration and things like that, but that is way outside my jurisdiction. So I'm just gonna leave it there before I anger a totally different side of YouTube. So overall, as far as sanders go, Ryobi is also going to take this round, and things are not looking good for Ridgid so far. But maybe they have a chance in our final category, number 5, which I'm adding by popular demand, because it's true that while you date your drill and your saws generally, you marry the batteries that you're buying into. So while the 4 categories previous covered the most critical tool categories in a wood shop, the ecosystem around it can help you level up your work or even your everyday life outside of the shop. Let's start with accessories. Both brands offer a cordless shop vac. Ryobi offers multiple options in different sizes and price points. Both brands offer a variety of lights and things like job site blowers, but here's where things start to get pretty lopsided. Ryobi cites over 300 tools on the One Plus platform, their 18-volt platform, and that's not a typo. 300 plus tools is industry leading across all brands, not just in the mid-tier space, save for maybe Makita, who has also over 300. If you count their coffee maker as a tool, that's a whole separate story. Regardless, if you need a tool, Ryobi's probably got one for you. And not only do they probably have one, they probably have multiple versions of it. They probably have at least a brushless version and probably a couple of brushed versions, which is a great way to save money if it's a tool that you're not using as frequently. I'm not a huge fan of brushed tools, but everything has a time and place. If you need a cordless fan when it gets hot in July and you're working on projects, they offer multiple options for you. Or if you need lawn equipment because you neglected mowing to go work on a woodworking project, Ryobi not only has full-size leaf blowers, but also string trimmers and even an 18-volt powered lawnmower. It's the whole deal. They have an entire fleet of tools in the broadest sense possible, all on the same exact battery platform with the same charger, a battery platform that's been continuously supported for longer than I've been alive. Now, there are qualms I've heard about these batteries. Some people say that the design just feels outdated or the stem makes them a little bit more prone to breaking if you drop them. I also would add that the way that they click into tools generally doesn't feel quite as satisfying as a more modern slide-in battery. But here's the thing, once the battery makes it into the tool, you won't even notice it. Ridgid's lineup is respectable. They claim that they only have 30 tools in their cordless platform, which is 10 times less than Ryobi, and their lineup would be totally fine in a vacuum. But the problem is, we're comparing it to literally the largest tool ecosystem out there. So if you're one of the millions of people who have bought into Ryobi in recent years, it's probably because you want one battery platform to rule not only your shop, but your yard and your house in general. Now let's talk about battery pricing though, because that's one way that a lot of people feel pinched once they start investing in a platform, and then you figure out that you're gonna need a handful of batteries to really get everything done. For example, a 1.5 amp hour battery from Ryobi costs around $45. That's pretty much the smallest battery that you can get on pretty much any battery platform, but it's just for comparison. Obviously, the larger your battery, the more it's gonna scale up. The same size battery on the Ridgid platform costs nearly $80, basically double the cost of Ryobi. And they're both just basic batteries, not high output, nothing special about them. What about availability? Both brands live in Home Depot, so here they're both on completely equal footing. And of course, you can also buy them on Home Depot's website where you can access the whole lineups, which is nice because you don't have to hunt around at specialty retailers or pay for online shipping in most cases. And now the moment a lot of you have been waiting for, let's talk about warranties and specifically Ridgid's lifetime service agreement. Notice how they don't call it a warranty. I'm not a lawyer, just to be clear, and I'm not making any accusations, but there's a reason that they phrase it that way. The word warranty carries with it a lot of legal requirements and precedent, and while I'm not going to claim that they use it as some sort of loophole, I'm just saying, personally for me, that does concern me. And I've certainly read about negative experiences online and heard from you guys that do give me a little bit of pause. Now, your mileage may vary. Obviously, the lifetime part of that is a huge benefit if that's something that you're looking for or you're comfortable with the experience that you think you're going to get with them. And I don't want to overblow this. It's not like manufacturers aren't also a giant pain with normal warranties. I'm just saying that in the year 2026, it's worth taking a critical look at anything that calls itself lifetime. There's almost always going to be a trade-off. So I'd love for you to leave a comment of what your experiences are or what you're seeing out there. This is something where the more data points we can gather in one place, the better. As far as Ryobi goes, they offer a very industry standard, maybe a little bit on the shorter end, 3-year warranty. So with all that said, the final results are in. If you went all in on the Ridgid tools that we discussed, you'd be spending this much on those 5 core tools that we spoke about from those 4 categories, which is roughly this much per tool. With Ryobi, you're spending a grand total of this much, which is around this much per tool. So this Best Buy price fight between 2 sibling brands, Ryobi HP is going to sweep all 5 rounds. Now this tool battle is going to inform the updated bang for your buck tier list, which is going to come out later this year. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way out and let me know which matchup of brands you want to see next. And to get access to a growing list of exclusive content that I put out, consider joining as a member, either through the YouTube join button for your convenience or directly through my website for the best pricing I can offer at pocketwoodworking.com. And in the meantime, no matter if your shop is covered in orange or green tools, enjoy the build. Thanks for watching.